Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start the third panel entitled Women Leading the Charge. For the discussion, I'm inviting, and they are already on stage actually, the three panelists with us. Madame Alia Al Khaled, a member of the Kuwait Parliament and the member of the Education and Special Needs Committee in particular. Madame Mariam Jafar, who's a member of Singapore Parliament, and Madame Rafia Al-Talai, who's editor-in-chief of Saada, which is a digital publication of the Middle East program of Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, based in DC. The moderator for this panel will be Dr. Iman Al-Badawi, Director for Peace, Security and Foreign Policy at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome back, everyone. I should note that I think it was Dr. Mansour that described this actual time in the calendar as the graveyard section. Is it the graveyard start? So that's a really good welcome, I think, for you guys, and a big amount of pressure for this panel. I do believe we will be able to at least wake you up. It's a good digestive subject. Just to say, I think worth observing, two of our panelists are well-known parliamentarians within their respective countries. We have Mariam, who's the panelist, who's a parliamentarian for Singapore, and we have Alia, who's a parliamentarian for Kuwait. No small feats within their careers, and I think that's something that we'll hopefully understand a little bit more about. And we also have a very esteemed journalist and scholar, Rafia, on the region. And so each of these women have, I think, remarkable stories, which I hope we'll be able to hear a lot more about today. But I think they're also common in the sense that they've really had to overcome some important barriers. And I think that's in itself a really important part of this conversation today. I think we'll start with Rafia because she has a presentation for us, and then we'll work through the panel.
Thank you. So I would like first to talk about the word empowerment before going into the details. So in Arabic, in fact, we have two nouns for empowerment. One is tamakkun and the other one is tamkeen. And to make the difference between them, tamakkun, that a person is empowered. And tamkeen, it means the person being empowered by someone or something. And they are two different meaning, because when I ask women, what does it mean to you to be empowered? And that has been my own personal question over the years. And most women I talked to, it wasn't, when they answered, it wasn't only education or economy or, other issues. And that's why maybe women issues and women empowerment is more complicated than any other issues, because it is a collection of all other issues that involve women empowerment. So also I would like to talk about the definition of empowerment that I mean when in my presentation. So basically, I'll be talking about empowerment as that women now have the ability to make their own choices that related to their life, which they didn't have in the past, okay? So this is the measure if we want to say a woman is empowered or not. And now I will start my presentation. So are educated women empowered? And that has been, as I told you, my question. I am educated, and sometimes I'm educated more than my brothers or my cousins, but then in the society still they feel they are better than me. And the question was why they think they are better, despite the fact that I am more educated, I am smarter, I am more active in many things. But then, growing up, it didn't hit my mind that it's very simple answer, that just because of their gender or because they are males. Nothing else. And that's why even during, my education, and then when I worked, and afterwards when I pursue to be also a parliamentarian in Oman. So I ran for the elections, but unfortunately, I failed. And so I think there are three main issues that we have to discuss if we want to talk about women empowerment. So first is education, second is economy, the third is public policy, which I think is usually, I wouldn't say missing, but is not discussed as a main issue that might affect women empowerment in the Gulf. So, as it was mentioned, I don't want to talk too much about education. Most of the Gulf higher education institutions have more females than males. It's between 50 to 60% most of the time. And so, so they don't have problem mainly in education, although there are some discriminations in some institutions in the Gulf that girls not granted equally in some institutions to pursue higher education. But this is another, not another topic, but I might mention it later. So again, Saudi Arabia and then in Oman and all of these, as we mentioned, they are almost half or more. But then when we talk about women in labor force, the average is 31%, but also this morning it was mentioned it could be 18% only the average of women working in the Gulf. And I think there is also a problem in identifying the data and information about women due to two things, I think. First, we do a lot of research, we do a lot of surveys, but then we don't publish a lot of them. So because they are done for maybe sometimes for a certain ministry or for certain purposes, but then they are not published. And the access to information is very, I would say, difficult most of the time to get information. The same thing about unemployment among females and also males, for example, in my own country. So when I look for information and data, I get sometimes conflicting information. But then the second factor is that, the Gulf consists like somewhere between 20% to 80% non-citizens or foreigners, so who are not like citizens. I don't like this differentiation, but also when we calculate or we have research, we don't know sometimes whether citizens and non-citizens are included, like women, like from Oman, are all Omanis or also included non-Omani women, for example, and the same thing for the rest of the Gulf, and that's why it's very difficult to, have a concrete data. So, okay, now we graduated and we are happy, we have our certificates, even master degrees or PhD. What happened? Again, employment is very hard to find and to, get equal opportunity. And I would like to mention, because some people will get a little bit sensitive when talking about other countries, but I would like to mention, for example, Oman. Oman went through, it has in fact a chronic problem of unemployment. It's huge and big. And again, we don't have the concrete data. Maybe Dr. Mohammed will tell us. But then, the unemployment rate in Oman is somewhere between like 13% to 32%. I don't know. But then it's rare to mention that female unemployment is even higher than male unemployment in Oman. And also, all these, or most of them, like 90% of them, are in fact graduate of a higher education institution. So, so women, there are many, educated women face significant barriers to entering and remaining in the workforce, and this is very important. So might they get the job, but then they don't continue. Social norms, legal restrictions, and economic structure. I know that I think all Gulf countries have visions like 2030, 2040, and they want to reduce the absence or the limited numbers of women working in the market. But then, as Dr. Hana, I think she mentioned this morning, there is a lot of expectation and family pressure, but then I think this is also a matter of policy. So let's go. Okay, so I would like to talk about countries. So women obtained the right to vote this is, I will include 3 things, mainly education, policy making, so you understand what is the status of women in each country. Oops. Okay. So the last election in Oman, 2023, in October 2023, last year, we don't have any women elected. In November 2023, 18 women were appointed to the State Council. So in Oman, we have 2 chambers. One is appointed by the Sultan himself, which is the State Council, and it consists, I think, 86 members. And there is the Majlis al-Shura, which is fully elected. And so it's also 86, I think, or maybe it was more last year because they added, the population when it's increased, so they increased the representative too, but almost the same number. So now we don't have any women in Majlis al-Shura, and we have 18, which is the largest number ever. So, okay, the funny thing about this is that usually it's said in Oman that usually the appointment of the new members of Majlis al-Dawla, the State Council, it comes after the results of Majlis al-Shura, which is the elected one. And then when we have maximum, we had 2 women members in all the history of women, running for the elections since 1994. So now the Sultan will appoint the number of women that to compensate or to make it up for women, the loss in Majlis al-Shura. But then the question always in my mind and other women, so since the Sultan can appoint any number he wants, for the State Council, why he doesn't appoint 50% of the members of this State Council, especially that women in Oman are, in fact, almost 50% of the population. But then this is the case. Okay, we have more women, but then 0 women in Majlis al-Shura. And anyway, I think this is important if these women are effectively and directly participate in policy making in Oman. So the number of female ministers in Oman is 3. The female population, as I mentioned, is 49+%. Working women, 28% to 32%. And I told you that the data always is not. Oh, okay. So the status of women in Bahrain, it's similar, but then I'll go to the part of the elections. 2022 elections, women, they have won 8 seats out of 40 seats in the House of Representatives, and the percentage is at 33%. And then in the government, there is 4 women ministers out of 23. Most of the Gulf, I think they have 20+ ministers, and usually the range of women is between 1 or 3. But I will show you other things. So also women participation is 39%. Status of women in Qatar. Qatar is very interesting case, in fact, because it had the lowest rate of females in the world. And that was surprising for me. I didn't know. I lived in Qatar for 5 years. I didn't know this information when I was there. So, and that is maybe a quarter, 24, almost 25% of the total population. And again, I'm not sure if that is the Qatari females only or also included the non-Qataris females. I have to say this. But then also by appointment, women, they are there's no women won out of 27 candidates, campaigns for 30 seats, and the Amir appoint 15 of them. And that's why there are women sometimes because are appointed. But why it's important to see if women are elected or not elected, because that gives us indication what is women's status actually in the Gulf or in the environment itself or the social environment itself. I said that, okay. Again, that 58% of women population, I think that included non-Qatari women. Okay, women in Kuwait is interesting because women are actually, in population, there are more than men. And yet they couldn't win the election. We have only 1 member of the Majlis al-Ummah, of the parliament, the Kuwaiti parliament. And so this is, I think, sad. And especially for Kuwait, because I always, Kuwait has a special place in my heart, because I think women in Kuwait, they have a real women movement, and it's not only about politics, but it's also about all other issues related to women and women rights. And I think I think we should learn a lot from women movement in Kuwait, women lobbying in Kuwait to gain their political rights. You know, it just before the Saudi Arabia, the Kuwaiti women gained their political right, and where it's expected that to be leading, giving the history of women in the education in Kuwait, in fact. So, so the participation, again, of women in the workplace or labor force is 43%. And again, I'm not sure because, you know, the most difficult part is like when I go to the latest census is to find out. And sometimes even women percentage in sectors or something, it's not there at all. Or it's not mentioned. Sometimes they say muwatin or muwatina, like citizens, but then also sometimes they don't mention specifically that are these citizens or including other people resident living in the country. Okay, United Arab Emirates, actually today also it was mentioned the 50% of the Federal Al-Majlis Al-Ittihadi, I think. And it was, again, its policy, which yeah, I respect a lot. In fact, into that, generally, I think we should have quota anyway for the appointed councils. But I think, again, when we talk of, we have 50 women appointed, and that is not a direct criticism to the United Arab Emirates, but generally, I think we lack sometimes in the Gulf when we appoint women a mechanism of appointment. So we do, the question, the dilemma always is like, we have 50% of women, but what they are doing for women, do they have a women issues or women rights agenda or not? According to what criteria exactly these women are appointed? It's the same in Oman for the state council and everything. So how we measure, like from my point of view, that I think, although I don't call for women to be feminist or women rights, whatever advocate, but I think it's part of their obligations. Since they were appointed specifically for their gender, right? They want to have this, you know, equal opportunity or to show that we have like 20 women here, 30 women there. So also, it's just a representation, right? So they should do something. These women, they should, in fact, do something for the rest of the women because they are there because they are women, and the state or the government want to look nice or serious about women issues, so that they should do something about, you know, women issues, women rights, about discriminatory laws and other issues that are related to traditions and social, you know, challenges that facing women. Again, 40, almost 47, yeah, and I have women working, but again, I don't think that is only Emirati women. I think it's included non-Emirati women. Why is that significant? Although I don't want to discriminate or to make things looks like there is discrimination between citizens and non-citizens, but to give an indication about the social norm about empowerment, women empowerment, it's very important to see the locals, like how, because it's always in the Gulf, it's like because they are not Khaliji or not Omani or not Kuwaiti or not Emirati, they are behaving this way or they're getting this thing. And since we make this differentiation in many aspects of professional life and also social life, we should also, you know, see how the local women or the nationals, in fact, women in this case, enjoy rights and, I mean, equal rights to male counterparts. So Saudi Arabia, I think Dr. Hana talked a lot, and it's, yeah, and now the Vision 2023, 2030 aims to have more women participation, and this is, I think, a big challenge, given the reasons she mentioned today. But percentage of female, again, okay, in the policy making, women, you know, the 20%, I think 30%, 20% are appointed, and the rest supposed to be elected. But then women engaging in policy making is very important, that they do have a women right agenda. It's not because they appointed and they should be loyal for the government and doing whatever the government tells them, and they feel honored because they are in this place. Well, but I think Saudi women are like the Kuwaitis are also educated, and they have the second, I think, successful or somehow successful women movement. Although, like our leaders would like to always have the achievement under their names, not under the pressure of, the citizens or females, work or lobbying or pressure. So, okay. I would like to skip that. Okay, I would like to stop with women's activism in the region. I think we owe a lot to women activism. I mentioned the Kuwaitis, the Kuwaiti women, and the Saudi women also. And now I think there is a lot of things happening in the region. For example, in Kuwait, they have this new law that women who want to run for the elections, they have to follow Sharia al-Islamiyya, the Islamic law. And this is kind of debatable and has a lot of things. Not only women, everyone, any candidate. So how we can measure, if, for example, if a woman wearing hijab considered as a serious candidate, people will vote for her or not, but obviously they did. And then, so how we measure men, for example, if he has a beard, he's what doing, like exactly how we can know that he is like, following Sharia al-Islamiyya. But then what I want to say, thanks to women, activism, who in fact highlighted a lot of issues happening in the Gulf, in each country. And then very important to mention that it's very easy to accuse us like women rights activists or women working on like women issues and policies by adopting like Western agenda. This is the easiest accusation ever. So even if you never been to any of Western countries or not educated in any of these countries, but then you have the sense of justice and equality, right? You don't need someone to tell you you are not equal. I had this feeling since I was in elementary school. Why my brother can do this and I cannot do this? Why my cousins can do that and why? All these questions before even I left that small, hometown. And then I hate it very much, like when we learned some of the things, of course, the world becoming very small. We take everything from the world, from the West, right? And we celebrate ourselves when we achieve the goals that the West, but when it comes to women issues, it's always there is something against our tradition, against our religion. And like we don't have the sense what is right for us and what is not right for us. And what I think people, generally, even this morning, one of the panelists, when I asked a question, he just, as a defensive, he mentioned like the US, whatever, right? I might be influenced by, but that is not true. But if it's a good thing, I don't mind to be influenced. But we have to be careful not to go there, because the rights are rights, whether under, Western country or Eastern country or, Gulf countries. Okay, traditional gender roles, I think they play a significant role on placing women in a status that they deserve better than that one. I talked about women representation. I will leave for the questions a lot of things. I know I am approaching my time, and Iman will ask some questions. So we need a lot of reforms on the level of leadership development and create network opportunities to allow, this is for the policymaking, how we make women to have more women in, policy making, legislative reforms, review and reform electoral laws, and many other things, policy advocacy, collaboration, and all these issues. So if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafia. I think that's a really excellent foundational start for this conversation. I have many questions, but let's start go ahead with Alia, and then I'll get a bit more discussion after Mariam. Thank you.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you, Rafia, for the beautiful presentation. I have a lot to add to it. Good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to be here, and I would like to thank the National University of Singapore and the Middle East Institute for inviting me and for organizing this conference. Now, whenever I hear the phrase of women role in leadership, I always ask myself, would we discuss men's role in leadership? The answer, of course, is no, out of the question, as if it's given. Gender equality means no discrimination between two genders as basic. Leadership is all about the creativity, capabilities, capacity, which can be found in both men and women without the superiority of any gender over the other. The Wright brothers created the first plane. Ada Lovelace created the first computer program. Abraham Lincoln ended slavery in America. Queen Victoria enabled the Industrial Revolution in England. However, we must admit that feminine and masculine qualities do differ by nature. We cannot ignore that. Masculinity is driven by aggression, assertiveness, and competition, while femininity is driven by passion, patience, and caring. Masculinity-focused culture in Kuwait suppressed women and their rights, even in their choice of clothing. Kuwaiti women used to be covered in veils and long black covers until the movement of 4 brave young girls in 1954. Those high school girls were energized and ambitious to discover the world. They wanted to travel to Baghdad back then with their Arab teachers, but they couldn't due to their traditional face covering costume. As a resentment movement and as an expression to have a say in their decision of what to wear and where to go, they threw their veils in the middle of the playground of their schools, poured some gasoline on them, and burned them. That was in 1954. Of course, the masculine culture resented their action and gave them the options, either to continue education with veils or to quit education, stay home without veils. They chose education and attended schools with veils. They kept their rights demands to themselves for almost 5 years until they arrived Kuwait after graduating from Cairo University back then. When they stepped down from the plane without veils and long black covers, they shook Kuwait yet again. And with their second brave action, the mandatory face covering in Kuwait ended. That was shocking to you.
He was shocked. I think we don't need to drink.
That movement paved the way for women in Kuwait to become more aware of their rights, excel in education equally with men, and develop more leadership qualities. But still, even after those girls' heroic efforts, women's political rights remained suppressed until they were granted 51 years later in 2006, when the first 4 women were elected as MPs. Despite the high expectation for more representation of women, the number of MPs declined in later parliaments. The 2020 parliament included no women. The 2022 parliament included 2. The 2023 Parliament included only one woman MP. What could be the reason for such decline? I believe it is a very valid question to look into. In my opinion, the influence of political agendas significantly shapes social, cultural, religious, and gender factors. One's political agenda manipulates those critical aspects, societal and educational system fall back as expected. That's the case in Kuwait, where different agendas have shaped our society and educational system over the past year and mainly negatively affected women. This negative effect reflected clearly in the result of election and women presence in leadership positions. Therefore, have we progressed in creating women leaders since 2006, or have we regressed? Frankly, I believe that we have regressed, and I say it with sorrow. We have to admit that we need to shift our focus from finding the role of women in leadership to finding more women to fill leadership roles. And there is a huge difference between both. The knowledge economy can help more women become leaders and create more promising and stable future where feminine qualities are respected and gender is no longer a barrier. The knowledge economy, with its reliance on data and information, presents a significant opportunity for women. By mastering scientific methods and tools, women can substantially impact the economy. This potential highlights the economic benefits of empowering women and promoting gender equality in Kuwait, painting a promising picture for a future where women's contributions are valued and respected. Even mothers can hold a unique position of influence over the next generation. Their values and skills shape the future. If they prioritize impactful skills that contribute to the economy, they will raise children who also value these skills. This highlights the crucial role of women, not only in the present, but also in the future of Kuwait's economy and society, instilling hope for a more equitable and a prosperous future. I made it short, and thank you very much.
That was a very, I think, heavy and impactful intervention. Hopefully we can unpack that a bit more. Mariam, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is an honor to speak today on a topic that is very, very close to my heart. I'd like to share some, comments on two main subtopics. So one is about the Singapore experience on women's development, and then two, some specific considerations in the Malay Muslim community, speaking as a Malay Muslim woman myself. So first, the Singapore experience. Our story is well known. Our journey to become a shining red dot as one of continuous improvement, innovation, and resilience. And in this journey, women have always played a pivotal role in all spheres, be it in government, business, education, culture, or sports. Each one blazing the trail for the women who come after them. And of course, one prominent example is President Halimah, who was not only our first female president, but also our first Malay Muslim president in 50 years. So her presidency not only was a significant milestone for gender equality, but also emphasizes the importance of inclusivity and diversity in leadership. And she's a beacon of hope and progress for Singaporeans and a real inspiration for young Muslim women. Today, men and women in Singapore have comparable educational outcomes and achievements. About 50% of university graduates are women. The women's workforce participation rate has risen from 53% in 1994 to 75% in 2021. And the percentage of women on boards of the top 100 listed companies has risen from 7.5% in 2014 to just under 20% today. And among the government statutory boards and IPCs, that figure is closer to 30%. Meanwhile, 13% of companies have female CEOs. And the gender pay gap has improved from 8.8% in 2002 to 4.3% in 2020. Still too high, but lower than the US and Canada figure. And in politics, women today make up 30% of parliament, which in a system without quotas, I think is quite leading in the world. And so how do we get there? First, I think we got some of the basic foundational things right. Women were given the right to vote as early as 1959 when we had universal suffrage. And I think there were 5 women MPs elected in that very first election. The establishment of the Women's Charter happened back in 1961 and institutionalized the equal standing of men and women in marriage and ensured the welfare and protection of women and children. We had compulsory education since the year 2000 and equal opportunities in education for men and women. And significant improvements have been made in healthcare services, including maternal health, and workplace protections for women, including, non-discrimination against maternity leave, as well as support for vulnerable women and families. Now, second is the role of women themselves in driving this change. I don't think this can be underestimated. If we look at every significant reform for the welfare of women, many have been, I think perhaps all, have been pushed by inspired women leadership. For example, Sheikh Zahra binti Nur Muhammad established the Muslim Women's Welfare Organization in 1947. She was seen as a savior of destitute women and children of all races, actually, and provided education and skills for them to break the cycle of poverty. Sheikh Zahra and MWWA pushed for marriage reform to raise the legal age of marriage and was instrumental in setting up the Women's Charter. Ms. Khatijun Nisa Siraj set up PPIS, or the Young Muslim Women's Association, in 1958, I believe, after seeing that she was often one of the only women on the committees that she sat on and feared that no one was looking after the interests of Muslim women. And so she and PPIS pressed for the formation of the Sharia court. She became eventually the first caseworker in the Sharia court and put in procedures to protect Muslim women from arbitrary divorce. And within a few years, the divorce rate amongst Muslims halved from 51% to 22%. Then we have social worker Tong Sin Nyo, who conceptualized and set up the first family services center all the way back in 1977. The idea that we needed a one-stop shop for the provision of services for families in need. And in politics, in 1985, Dr. Aline Wong, ruling party PVP MP, called for laws against gender discrimination. And it's only today that we are looking at workplace fairness legislation, including for gender. But there's still areas where women face barriers and challenges, whether it's glass ceilings or unconscious bias at work, gender stereotypes. And at home, women still shoulder a disproportionately higher load at home. Yeah. So to become an even more inclusive and a fairer society, I think it's pretty clear that what's needed is a whole of society mindset shift on precisely what you said, gender roles. So it was in 2021, after a very extensive engagement, that the government, and very much supported by the women MPs in the PAP, published a white paper on women's development, which was accepted in Parliament, which covered 21 action plans in 5 areas. So one, equal opportunity in the workplace, very near and dear to me. Things around workplace fairness legislation, flexible work arrangements, career mentorship, parental leave for fathers, and of course, board diversity. 2, recognition and support for caregivers, including respite care and child and maternal health. 3, protection against violence and against family violence and hate, including revised sentencing frameworks and awareness building. 4, other support measures for women, including single parents, divorced or divorcing women, and enhanced support for low-income families, as well as elective egg freezing. And then lastly, mindset shift through education in schools and in the community. So nothing short of a whole of society effort like that, I think, is needed. And I think today we are on that journey. So I move now to the challenges specific to the Malay Muslim community. And I think I share many of your observations, not surprising given the common religious underpinnings. I think the interplay of cultural, religious, and socioeconomic factors creates a very complex landscape where progress is being made, yet challenges still very much persist. The traditional Malay Muslim culture emphasizes very distinct gender roles. Men are the breadwinners, women the caregivers. Whether it's for children or elderly parents, it doesn't matter whether it's your parent or my parent. The woman is always the one looking after either the in-laws or her parents herself. Even though many women work. And in particular, we are taught also to, I think particularly in our community, we are taught to respect our parents and to respect our elders and whatever they think about marriage and career, I think more so than in the Chinese community. And older Muslim men can be rather conservative, which I think has a lot of influence on the role of women in their families. And if it's not the father, it's the husband. Yesterday I had on Monday, I do my Meet the People sessions, and I had a woman come in who, just a couple of months ago, I had gotten her a job through a job matching, and she told me she had just quit her job, and it was because her husband actually felt that her husband didn't like her being in a job where she was interacting with men. This is 2024, right, in Singapore. So I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes here. Education is very important. If I think of where I am today, it's probably the single most important and liberating factor in a couple of ways. My father was a teacher. He wasn't super conservative, but certainly not the most modern either. But his belief in the power of education superseded everything else. And doing well in school gave me a lot of independence, to be the first in my family to go to college overseas, to go into jobs that he didn't really understand what I did, right? And then going to an all-girls school where there were no boys to take on, male roles in society, in the school, and where we had a principal who instilled in us the belief that we could do anything as girls, anything that we dreamt of, and make the world a better place. But education alone is not enough. I think education attainment and ensuring employment amongst Malay Muslim women has notably increased. But A, it lacks the other ethnic groups, and B, it doesn't fully translate into Malay Muslim women getting into leadership positions in their careers. So there are other cultural and structural factors at play, socioeconomic factors. Malay Muslim families generally have lower average incomes and larger families. So childcare responsibilities, financial constraints, a lack of financial independence really limits some of the opportunities. Entrepreneurship is a path that a growing number of women are pursuing, supported by self-help groups like Mendaki that are giving them some skills and training. And yes, religion too plays a significant role, as I discussed earlier. Modesty and adherence to religious practices are always in question. And the influence of religion can affect the perception of women's role in society and reinforce some of these gender stereotypes, even though personally I feel it provides a real framework for personal and spiritual development. And there are always societal expectations. In particular, I think the idea that family and collective peace and harmony is more important than any individual ambitions. Still, there's a growing support for women pursuing higher education and professional careers, so I think that's progress. Finally, representation and access. Again, I think this is something that cannot be underestimated. There are currently 3 female Malay Muslim elected members of parliament, and I think that is, and we are, in our 58 some odd years of history, we are number 4, 5, and 6. Right, so I think we, even though we're 30%, we've come a long way on overall women's representation in parliament. The fact that 6 people and 6 women MPs since independence is a very, very long time. And again, these cultural and social factors I talked about earlier come into play. I I may be, the first Malay senior partner in BCG in the world, but the first question sometimes I get from a small number of Muslim men is like, "Where is your hijab?" Right? And while I am told that I am a role model for many young Muslim women, there are those who ask, could she have made it in the corporate world if she were wearing a hijab? So we need female Malay Muslim MPs that are as diverse as the aspirations of Malay Muslim women in the population. And for more female empowerment in the Malay Muslim society, more really needs to be done to encourage more Malay women to become active in public life and to take on leadership positions. And this will require continuous support from government policies, from the community, and social shifts. So I'll stop now, and I look forward to our discussion.
That's wonderful. And I think I just want to note that I am creeping a little bit into the Q&A session, but just bear with me as I facilitate a discussion. I think the interventions by each of these women deserve a little bit of unpacking. My first question, I guess, is for Rafia. And I think you alluded to it a little bit in your comments. But I think it's an important one because of all the data and the stats that we often refer to when talking about this, either as a defensive mechanism or as an inspiration, a force for inspiration. But I think it suggests something that is important that I know I looked at when I came to this panel, which was looking at the data. Let's understand where women are, what's the status of women. And often you see, whether it's World Economic Forum, whether it's any of these really big platforms that are looking at these issues, they always make a reference directly to Western stats. And you've alluded to it today, I think. And it's an important question for us as we start to build policy and set a precedent of what we're trying to aim for in the Middle East or in Singapore. What do you think should be the benchmark for Middle East societies or for Muslim communities trying to push women's roles in society and get leadership positions where women fill them?
For the question, as I mentioned, first, women should have equal opportunity to education, higher education, and they have generally in the Gulf, equal opportunity to work force, and equal opportunity to the leadership position, equal opportunity to whatever making, decision positions, and of course, in the policy making. And that is my question was, are educated women empowered in the Gulf? My answer, short answer, is no, because we don't, it's not like the story of Singapore. It's like we lack that last part, that we have women educated. Let's say we have women, many, but not enough, who are financially independent. And I personally, like Mariam, I thought education is the main thing that transformed my life, made things differently. I have also an open-minded father who is himself mtawwa, like with the way we say. He's wearing the turban, he's an imam, he's, by the book. But then, as we said, discussed this morning, I think always that a woman needs at least 2 good men in her life. First, her father, the second is her husband. But then if one of them is not that good, it is a problem because, the social environment and the legal environment doesn't help. And if we want to talk about the real life of women, again, I'll go back to the first question I asked, which is, are educated women empowered? I said no. But then why it's important for women to make choices, and that's the definition of empowerment, right? If I can't make any decision that is related to my life, that is not empowerment. So what I think the benchmark is that when I know as a female I have equal, not only right, I have the equal feeling that men have, that they can make this decision about their lives. You see, a man always feel like in a Muslim community have the right to divorce his wife, have the right to marry another wife. He had a lot of rights was like inherited like this, and women are just like, they are threatened despite the PhD, despite everything they have, despite maybe the higher salary than their husbands, but the husband, one word. And that, my mother would tell me, for example, you are a woman, whether, طلعتي ولا نزلتي. I don't know even how to translate that. No matter you go where, yeah, up or down or whatever. So by the end, you are a woman means your power is very limited comparing to a male. Although she is very proud of me, but she thinks my husband had the right to whatever, you know. And so I think this is very important. Like we always look here, like over the Gulf, many women in the world maybe we think we are lucky because of certain issues, all of you know, okay, we have, you know, some wealth in the region that allowed us to have mainly good education. But then in our, you know, personal lives, most women, they don't have, you know, that opportunity of making, you know, important decisions about their lives, even about birth spacing or having kids. Like how many kids she has, she cannot make the decision without the consent of her husband, for example. Like their own body, they don't own it. So I think policy making, having more women. So I have this very short story since everyone was telling story this morning. So my PhD focus was women political participation in Oman, but also with the comparison with the Gulf, but Oman. So it is only women perspective. So I only interviewed and focused on women, you know, candidates who ran for Majlis Shura, whether they, majority, unfortunately, they didn't make it, only 2 or 3 who did. And so I asked them how the experience, is about women experience, how the experience of election changed them. So all of them, you see, these women, they, their education level is between high school and PhD. Okay, but all of them, they have one thing in common, that they felt more need for women to be in policy-making position because they ran, because they saw a lot of things. Some of them teachers, some of them yeah, community associations, like women community associations leaders, or you know, doing more activity in the community. So all of them, they said, okay, we are educated, we have our jobs, but then there is something lack, which is like that, the participation in decision-making and in policy-making. Because when the law is being made or any policy is being made, women are absent from this discussion. And sometimes it's whether women should have 40 days maternity leave or they have 4 months or 3 months maternity leave. And who discussed this? Only men. Women are not there. Who they are to decide for women what is right and what is not right for them. So I think the benchmark mark is the laws and the policies by the end, since we already achieved, let's say, education and economy part.
Well said. Any reactions from Alia on what Rafia just said? On the point about policy should be our benchmark, but maybe also some of the other reflections and the stories that Rafia had, because I know we had many discussions, you referenced things like divorce and the relationship with husbands, but these are important because I think for me, it's important to explain why maybe a topic around divorce rate is relevant to a topic around women's rights, and whether what's the link between women empowerment and divorce rates. I mean, that's a reason for why there might be some alarm by some people in society for something that should be quite positive can lead to something that is deemed quite negative.
All right. Divorce rate, it's a phenomena. Now, when we look into that phenomena, then we need to look into the reasons behind it. And if we would look into the reason behind any phenomena, we can see that it is either it has a legal aspect because of faulty legislation, or it is because of a social norm. Okay, so it is either one of them. Sometimes it couldn't be like a faulty legislation, but it can be a wrong implementation. For example, in Kuwait, we do have the family law. The family law is one strong, solid legislation. It passed like 7 or 8 years back, but we do have issues in the implementation because of the mindset of the people who are responsible of implementing this law. And I believe the aspect of implementation has been discussed in all 3 panels in here. So this requires a certain knowledge, certain training for the people who are handling such laws to implement them Now, sometimes they do go through those training courses, but eventually their own point of view, their own perception would be a barrier in there. For example, a very simple example. This law allows any female to go to the police station in Kuwait and report any violence against her. She can do it by herself solely as long as she is over 18 years old. But so many times, those reports is being rejected because the police officer over there is requesting the guardian. But the law doesn't state the guardian. So again, is it legislative, or is it socially, or is it religious? It is all intersected. We need to bring them apart, analyze them, and then go again into education and reform education. And the most important aspect in education is take politics away from education. What damaged Kuwait, and I would say it frankly, I am a very blunt, frank person. Just take religious politics out of education. Once it is done, we can see a huge positive turnover for Kuwait in a very limited years. And I will always say, women in our societies are the weakest link. Anything goes bad, it would hit her first. Anything goes good, she will gain it last. She's always the weakest link. So we need to understand our culture. We need to go into the wave of modernization, but women has to get the will. I do believe that men do support women. Yes, the effect of father and the husband, but there is willingness. If that willingness isn't found within the female, it would be very hard to achieve any success in our society. And I would state it from experience. They will give us the support, they are support system, but we are the initiator. Thank you.
Thank you, Alia. I'm conscious of time and I want to make sure that the room gets a chance to ask questions. Otherwise, I will ask questions. I'm very ready to do that. Okay. I think if you just, if you get behind the queue of the mic, I think that's probably the best way to do it. And you can fight it out, whoever goes first. Okay, Dr. Mansour.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful panel. I have some clarification to be made by Dr. Rafia. Is about the national UAE National Council, which is the parliament in the United Arab Emirates. Actually, 50-50 is where the legislation devoted 50%, not the number of the parliament to females, to women. However, the 50% are not appointed totally from the women's side. 50% of the 50% has been elected. So the 50% of the parliament overall is elected and 50% been appointed. So even from the women, so there are 50% of them being elected. That's only clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My name is Jörg Matthias Determann. I'm from Virginia Commonwealth University in Qatar. All of you talked about power. The power in a lot of Middle Eastern countries lies in the security apparatuses, lies with the military, with police, with the military intelligence. And if you look at like heads of states, right, who became presidents of Egypt, who become like kings of Saudi Arabia, a lot of these heads of states that were previously ministers of defense, ministers of the interior, ministers of National Guard, of military intelligence, essentially coming out of the security and military and defense apparatus. Now, I was wondering, how important would it be for women's empowerment, for not just for women to become Minister of Culture, Minister of Education, Minister of Health, but how important would it be for women's empowerment to actually rise up in the security apparatus, to have a female Minister of Defense, to have a female Minister of Interior, have a female Minister of the National Guard, so that women could actually reach the highest levels of power? Thank you.
I love that question. Let's just take a couple more and we'll divvy it out.
Hi, my name is Nazat Fahima. Picking up on the point about, the barriers to the entry of workforce, one thing I realize is there's a supply of women leaders from what I hear, and there also seems to be certain kind of infrastructures and facilities to allow them into leadership roles. And yet when they are in the leadership roles, there seems to be a time when there's a regression, as you said, in Kuwait. Do you think at the space within the leadership, the environment isn't conducive enough for the leadership of a woman to sustain? And is this because of cultural norms? Is it because men are not used to it? Or is it self-assumed roles of women that kind of makes them backstab on it? Because I also speak from experience, and many times in these spaces, I've not had much problems in terms of men being the obstacle or anything, and yet certain things about the environment, especially power dynamics and etc., does create discomfort. And so the second question is also on, do you think the intensity of discussion on hijab and religion regarding women have been so intense as compared to what leadership is? If that's the case, also picking up from what Madam Alia said, do you think religion has become an obstacle for women empowerment in the Gulf countries? Yeah.
Yeah, please give your question. No, I'll remind you.
Hello.
Okay, about women ministers. So yes, so I will tell you, like many years ago, just after the war in Iraq in 2003, the French Minister of Defense, she was a woman, and she was visiting Oman, and I was a journalist. I'm still, but I was a journalist in Oman at that time, and we were attending this press conference, and I remember just before the press conference, I had my colleague, an Omani journalist. We had the discussions about women, appointment in Oman. And usually they are like in the higher education, and the social development. They are like traditionally women ministers, but not others. And so I said, why always women have only, are appointed always for these, ministers, not others? And he said, what, you want a female minister for the defense, for example? And he said, yes, why not? You see? And he couldn't understand, like he thought I am a crazy person. That's simple. So I know some women in the world, like in other countries, mainly in the West, they come from, they are ministers of defense and interiors and others. And so we had this press conference, and we went together. I know I was assigned for that. I said, by the way, I am going to the female, the French female minister of defense. And everyone is going because the French, minister. And that doesn't make France look less powerful country having a woman, for the Ministry of Defense. But then you see the problem is like the mindset itself. And I think I can answer this question, why we don't appoint women in such positions. And is it legal? Is it social? Is it religious? It's what? I think, or social. I think the problem that women always perceived as, okay, emotional, they get angry easily, and they cannot, be as serious as men in issues like security and other things. And I would say emotions are good. That means we care. Okay, and if we are angry, we're angry because we want to make change. Okay, and I think that is drivers for us more than is the obstacles. But then I think it's the hierarchy and the patriarchy of the let's talk about the Gulf, which I know better. So who appoints women? Is the Sultan or the Emir or the King or, okay, the President, right? And they are males, and the products of this culture. and all the people surrounding them are mainly males, okay? And so why a male who has this power wants to abandon this unless they have a mindset that says, no, we are equal, citizens and we should have equal opportunities. But then the idea about women is like the power given to women is taken from men, and we shouldn't think this way. And I think this is the problem even in the social life. Like the husbands, sometimes they will divorce their wives because they are more powerful, they are more, educated. Like the divorce rate in the Gulf is very high. I remember once I read in Qatar, it was like 60%, and mainly because husbands couldn't bear the idea that the women somehow are more powerful than them. And that created a lot of problems. I know it's not only in Qatar, in the rest of the countries. So to make it very short, about the hijab, like for me, I can say that I think I am among women who I never thought that my religion or my hijab prevented me from doing whatever I wanted to do. I pursued my education to the PhD. I've been a journalist in all countries I lived in. I worked in UAE, I worked in Qatar, I worked in America in 2 different times. And I've been to many different countries in the West and the East. And I've been actually asked this question, did you feel being a Muslim woman, or especially journalists wearing a hijab? But I don't want to be too extreme. And like people say, if you don't see your hijab, or you don't let your hijab define your personality and who you are, people also will not see your hijab. But that case, that is the case of mine, but maybe not other women.
Rafia, please, let's just have some time for Mariam as also to give maybe some answers perhaps to the second question.
Sure. Maybe I think I'll address the second question on sustainability of women once we get into the leadership positions. I think when you start with the small gains, we have to recognize that it's fragile. So, one woman on a committee, 2 women on a committee don't make a difference. You need to have a certain critical mass, right? So before we start. So even in Singapore, right? So we used to have, there was a dark period in the 1980s where we went through 14 years without a women MP. And before that, there were 2. And then we, got them back again. And since then, it's been a slow but steady increase over time. Now with about 30% women, 27 women MPs, I think we've crossed that chasm. So do I see us regressing back into a 0 female MP position? I'm not a betting person, but if I were to bet, I would say I don't think that will happen again because we've crossed that chasm.
And then over to Alia to wrap up with her final remarks.
All right. About the question, the power question with the security and the police and whatsoever. Well, I do have my own personal belief, I've been always thinking, why couldn't I be the Minister of Interior? I asked myself, and I couldn't find any answer that could tell me that I couldn't. Yes, I can, okay? Because it is now, when you speak about Ministry of Interior, I'm not talking about the defense, I'm talking about the interior. It requires 2 elements. The first element is management. The other element is culture. Because the policemen, they have to be highly cultured because they are interacted with the masses and with the population, okay? Then comes whatever procedures and guidelines they are practicing, and there are responsible people over there to overlook that, okay? Now the position of the minister, yes, it is a political position, yet it is administrative. So we should look at that position from that angle. I can see no obstacle, and this is one of my ambitions. So maybe one day I will be there, I will let you know. Could be. Now the other question, why people are not used to women as leaders? Briefly, I would say it's a trust issue. Again, in our societies, in our culture, masculinity. They would see the man figure is the source of security. Even the woman is doing everything at home. It is just embedded there, subconsciously. It resides in there. Now, this takes time and patience to overcome. Third, is religion an obstacle? Religion is never an obstacle. It's never an obstacle. You know what is the obstacle? Is our way of understanding our religion, the way we are practicing our religion. This is the obstacle. Now, whatever I do religiously inside my home, it is my concern. But at the educational system there, I cannot put on them, I put all the students on one track and saying this is religion. Now, cloning, who can interpret this religiously? Reaching the moon, who can interpret that religiously? There is science, there is religion. Religion is my tool to purify myself, to elevate my values, to be a good and better citizen, to elevate science, and to be more productive in my society. This is how I see it. It is a vital tool to support myself, and only within myself, my kids, and my family. Thank you.